We are playing Quintessential Paladin. I am Peter the Hermit, and we are on the First Crusade. Now, shortly after the fall of Nicaea, it was late June 1097, the Crusaders encountered the principal Seljuk army of Anatolia, that would be Asia Minor here, modern-day Turkey. They fought a battle at Dorylaeum called the Valley of Dogorgan by John George Edgar in his 1860 volumes on chivalry. Heroism itself could not sustain the spirit of a handful of men who saw before them a host bent on their destruction and thousands of sabers thirsting for their blood. It's actually very good reading, it's very colorful, and it's all online. John George Edgar, 1860 volumes on chivalry. Just before daybreak, I moved to the front of my pilgrims and recited the 8 Beatitudes. Blessed are the pure of heart, for they will see God. Priests swung incense burners and sprinkled holy water on the ranks. Most took turns making public confession. Alexander held a position high on a borrowed horse, dead center of the mass. Emich von Leiningen gave him one of his own chargers. Behind him, he could see that lord in the command pavilions with a crowd of courtiers and noble wives, all straining for a view of the upcoming action. Emich issued a salute as Alexander spurred his mount to rear up on 2 legs, to the delight of clapping onlookers. Alexander took off his helmet and smiled feverishly. He cast this helm aside with a discordant tang as it struck the ground. After that, all eyes were upon him. Has he lost his mind? That cheek will see red by day's end, mark my word. But Alexander was not finished. He dropped his shield and cast aside his sword with a sweeter tone of metal into a bowl. He pulled his set of chain over his head and discarded it too with a cascading jingle. Punctuating each action, the cheers of his men increased. Then he dismounted and disappeared for a moment, causing complete silence. What was he up to? Don't expend effort aiding him if he calls for help. The lone horse among the Peregrini Christi neighed horrifically and fell, its side slashed, its inside spilled. Atop the dead carcass stepped Alexander. In his hands he held aloft a grain scythe. The smell of the disemboweled beast traveled outward, causing many to retch. Blood oozed off the crude cutting tool, dripping and matting Alexander's coarse mane of hair. That rogue owes me a horse. An inhuman wail rose up from the people of Christ. They suddenly became veterans in heart and mind. There would be nothing after Alex's act which could shock them. God wills it. God wills it. God wills it. The soldiers cheered their finest. Alexander struck the dead beast across the neck, rising his weapon again on high. A rivulet of blood splayed from the blade and anointed the nearby soldiers. The force coalesced with hands raised. Each man pressed towards center mass to catch a drop of the crimson fluid. Thud, weapon fell on the animal's hindquarters. Swoosh, blood and sinew flung into the throng. He'll have them exhausted and in riot. But the pleb pauperum became a spinning wheel. After receiving a sacrifice, the faithful rushed away and offered space for the next in line to gain their sacrament. I found myself preaching, "This is the blood of Christ who takes away the sins of the world. Happy are we who are called to his supper." Now, I will endeavor, as a little bit of a change of pace here in my gameplay, to defeat 9, count them 9 Dark Knights, or gain the equivalent in Fostering Faith. I go over to my character page, and here you can see that I am Peter the Hermit, I am a Justice. I will have 1 set of plot armor, and the majority of my rolls to defeat Dark Knights, I will still be making on tests of prowess, where I can gain those modifiers. Now, I'm going to treat each individual action that I roll on my ref's page, trying to assemble a total of 9 Dark Knights. Can I get a little icon here? I have to defeat 9 Dark Knights, or I have to gain the equivalent of Fostering Faith. Now, if I ever run from any battle, it would zero out my tally of Fostering Faith. Fostering Faith I can also use as a flare. I'm using it as a mulligan where I can re-roll dice. Now, right now I'm very close to winning this anyway, but do I want to go into future episodes playing the game without any ability to nullify bad dice rolls? It's a big question. So I have to defeat 9 when that tally gets to 0, or if that tally got to 6, I could cancel all my Fostering Faith and eliminate the Dark Knights that I have remaining. Shall we add some context to help explain Sultan Arslan's impetuous plan? He had the Crusaders very much unprepared. He also had an inordinate amount of bow. The Sultan might have told his generals to hold the higher ground across the river and merely fire upon volley after volley, make the Crusaders come to them. He might have, probably would have, enticed the knights to rash action and charge. He would lose soldiers, but he may have won from the start. Why did he allow his generals to boldly attack? Was it mere arrogance? What is amazing about this valley, Dogorgan, is that it is the same place his father, Sultan Arslan, defeated the Byzantines. Alp killed the Emperor Romanus IV Diogenes here at the Battle of Manzikert, a decisive defeat. The Turk army was more than capable of handling European knights. However, the Seljuk were not prepared for the fanatics of the Peregrini Christi. Those Tafur came here prepared to die, with glory truly in doing so while killing someone else. No army since the Spartans had that resolve and dominant philosophy. This was the Holy Land, and all sins were shed by sanguine sacrifice. The Battle of Dorylaeum. Shall we get started here? We are going to array ourselves in two divisions behind the Pox. A division which is primarily the Norman Knights, and a division that's primarily people of Christ, the Peregrini Christi. Behind the Peregrini Christi are most of the mercenary knights, most of the camp followers, most of the independent households that have come as well on this quest. So two dominant forces. You have the Peregrini Christi and then you have the Norman Knights. Among the coterie of lords and ladies, these camp followers who have assembled a number of minor lords and princes. The place these guys have assembled is resembling more of like a betting gallery around the command pavilion. All of these different lords have an opinion of how the battle should be fought. Bishop Adamar and Robert Williamson are two of the principal NPC characters that I use in my video play here. They are the ones who actually have overall command and charge authority. And with them is my former liege lord, Emich von Leningen. They expect that there'll be a heavy assault that will come on the second division, which is the Norman Knights, led by Bohemond, the pirate. Bishop Adamar and Robert Williamson want to stand far enough back and away so they can see how the Peregrini Christi, my troops, with Alexander are doing in the battle. As long as we hold, they know there's hope. If we ever start to collapse, that's their time, they're going to flee. Now, the second division, as I said, is led by Bohemond, and these were the shock forces, most of the actual knights, the men that are on the Clydesdale, the men that are wearing the chainmail barding and themselves are heavily armored. Bohemond, unfortunately, though, he arrayed his horsemen further back on a slight rise in the hillside. Something may be going on here. Even though he was the first to spot the enemy advance at the river, he was positioned for better opportunity of defensive maneuver than actual attack. Now, once again, I must digress, as so few places on terra firma have such a pedigree for war. Maybe the Ardennes, but the Valley of Dogorgan had several important historic battles. The first great slaughter of humanity occurred in the 3rd century. The Goths were raiding. These were trans-Danubian tribes from the region of the Black Sea. The Roman army that was based in Anatolia was spread too thin, and the navy had moved west to reinforce the Greek provincials. Asia Minor was left exposed. In came the Goths. The only thing that saved the citizens was the attacking barbarians were unprepared and untrained to conduct siege. There was a castle temple complex here that sheltered the nobles and the peasants. The people inside tore apart the temple dedicatory statues to strengthen their walls. It helps to be pagan and have an abundance of statues and placards for tribute collection. The Swabians would have nodded approval. Gewicht, Gewicht. Now the battle raged as the Goths attacked and tried to swarm fixed fortified positions. Their loss and their bones were piled to honor the sacrifice made to the gods in losing their temples. The stone-carved artwork and the broken bones of those dead invaders were later unearthed by modern archaeologists. And let's go into our first dice rolls here. And I go back to my ref page, and I'm going to roll a single d6. If I rolled a 6, I will defeat a Dark Knight and foster faith. Now that's sort of a double, that's nice. I will get a fostering faith, which will raise me to 7. Could be a quick action here, but I'm sort of planning on. And I'm going to defeat perhaps one Dark Knight. Now, how do we defeat Dark Knights? Well, as a man of justice, I'm going to use tests of prowess, rolling 2 dice. And I rolled a 4 and a 3. My best roll is going to be a 5. It's a wise action. So I'm having a wise action of trying to keep the Peregrini calm as the enemy is slowly marching on us. And we're going to defeat one fell one or gain a modifier to treat 5s to 6s. Now, I'd have to defeat a Dark Knight by the referee action I took, but I can, if I wish, add another Dark Knight to the battle. And by doing so, I can use modifiers as 5s and 6s, and I will do that. So I'm now treating 5s to 6s, 2 dice, and I rolled my 6. A 6, a mighty action. I could defeat all the fell ones or a scourge. I have neither that I need to face here. Of the 2 Dark Knights I would like to defeat in this action, this segment, this round of the battle, I have defeated one of the 2 Dark Knight. Here comes another roll, and I've got a 5. Now, because I've had wise actions before, I'm treating 5s to 6s, so I've defeated the 2nd Dark Knight. Our situation found us assembled in a dry marsh. The spot was selected so the noble horses would have plenty of grass. Before we retired that evening, we did as we always did. We cheered 3 times. Save the Holy Sepulchre. Greek scouts came to the camp the night before with intelligence that the Sultan of Rome was already ready for action on the opposite side of the river. The enemy soldiers were too numerous to count, and in the morning, clouds of dust alerted us to the fact the foe was advancing. The Sultan expected his 200,000-strong army to quickly send us fleeing. Behind us, we could hear the nobles asking where was the warrior Bohemian, because he hadn't been seen for a little while. Now, the tally there, if you're keeping score with me, was that I added 1, defeated 2, and I went to 8. But I also picked up a 7th fostering faith from my adventures. I'm almost to the point where I could just call it in, but as I said, maybe I'm going to try to go through 9 full rounds here. Back to Pious Quest. Should I take a kingly deliberation, go back and talk with Robert Williamson, or should I just stick with what I do best, Pious Quest? Let me go another Pious Quest here, and I got a 3. I'm going to defeat a D6 fell ones to foster faith. Now, I can increase my fostering faith up to 8. Oh, the game just seems like it's easy. And a die 6 fell ones. Because my die 6 fell ones, 6, of course. 6 fell ones on tests of prowess. Now, I don't still have the modifier of 5 as 6s. I'm playing each of these as an individual round. That has both advantages and it has penalties. The penalties is I don't have the great advantages going forward, but each time I could possibly have penalties that would hit me, but they won't carry over. So let's take a look. I'm going to roll my 2 die 6 on test of prowess, trying to defeat the D6 fell ones. Look at that, 6 and 6. Another mighty action on my part. I've defeated a D6 fell ones. All the fell ones, even though there were 6, they all go down, and I am in another action. But you notice this did not drop my tally of knights I need to defeat, but that action did give me that extra fostering faith. My faith is almost greater than the Dark Knights to continue. We are hardly finished with the hit parade of slaughter. 17 September 1176 brings the Battle of Myriocephalum. The battle was a strategic reverse from Dorylaeum because the Byzantine forces tried to cross the river. Those troops of the emperor also had armored cataphracts similar to the Norman knights, but these mostly stumbled crossing the river. The Byzantines were trying to recover the interior of Anatolia from the Seljuk Turks. Now, spoiler alert, I guess the Turk were not fully ousted from our hell-bent for Jerusalem First Crusade marching through. The Byzantine loss in 1176, we're in 1097 now recall, led to the loss of the city of Nicaea, probably by the locals changing sides yet again. Money is loyal only to money. Pious Quest, should I take a kingly deliberation? Take one more Pious Quest, just to sort of game the system here. A 6, defeat a Dark Knight to foster faith. So I've gone to a 9 here, and by winning this battle, I could have 9 is better than 8. I could call it quits here. But why would I want to waste all that fostering faith I've accumulated when it looks like I'm in good shape? Do I press my luck? Well, I still have to defeat this Dark Knight in front of me in order to get that new fostering faith. 2 dice, and I roll 1 die. I cheated myself. How about if I roll 2 dice? A 6. A 6 means I defeat a Dark Knight. Now, Bohemian followed the river, looking to get behind the Turks. He eventually ranged so far that he realized he had little idea what was happening with the other divisions. Those would be my soldiers. The Norman lord tried to return to us when his horsemen were hit by the archers. Yet that foolish detachment of Turkish horsebowmen did not circle. Instead, they advanced right on Bohemond. And this is the first time that Bohemond and his knights, European knights, would teach a fine lesson when they charged and countercharged, and the Turkish light horsemen felt the first impact of armored knights on a flat surface. They were killed on the charge. Several hundred trained riders died immediately. Fully armored men in chain and chain barding hitting light horsemen. It's as if you're at medieval times and you're watching as they took 100 people from the audience, put them on horseback and said, now you're going to fight 100 medieval knights, go. Well-trained jousting knights went right in with their lances and mowed them down. After today, the Turkish light cavalry, the nobles essentially, are going to change their tactics a little bit. I am at a point now in the battle where the faith of my units, I could let them play it out. I could maybe go back and sip tea and drink grog at the command tent with the rest of them, or I can stay in the action and take my dice rolls trying to defeat these guys. This is actually a 7 for my last action. I'm going to press ahead. But I'm going to have to take kingly deliberations because they're probably trying to call me back. They're trying to say, your place is not there in the midst of the battle. You're going to get injured. And if you go, the Peregrini might rout. So let me take a die here to sort of convince them, no. I'm having fun. And here goes my die 6. It's a 3. Gain a critical deed to foster faith, yet lose your plot armor. Critical deeds are not as easy for me as just killing knights, yet lose my plot armor. That plot armor could be important. If I wanted to, I could nullify that here and keep my plot armor. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to re-roll that roll. Here goes my die in Kingly Deliberations. It's a 2. I will defeat a Dark Knight. Perfect. So my Dark Knights are at 7. After this little interlude, I hope to make them a 6. Back on tests of prowess, still have my plot armor, 2 dice, and I roll best roll of 4. Careful. So there's some pause in the action where I realize I'm pushing too forward. Maybe my men are trying to get into the river that divides the majority of our forces from the majority of the Turkish forces. I'm trying to keep them back. Right now we're just being harried by the knights who are hitting us hit and run with their light horses and their archers. We move into a situation where I'm careful. Could call it a push that nothing happened. I really want to treat that 4 as a 6. If you've been following along on other episodes, that's a nice advantage to have. But I added a Dark Knight. I need to defeat 2 Dark Knights during this section of my battle of Dorylaeum, if you want to go to a Greek pronunciation of all those vowels. And here comes my 2 dice, and I get best rolls of 3. That's a bad roll. I'm jolted. I'm going to lose one, either mighty, wise, or careful. But luckily, my careful, I'm already treating 4s as 6s, so I'll drop my 4s, knowing that I will treat them as 6s instead. So that's sort of like a push, where I don't lose much. Another die roll, a 4. Now I'm treating 4s as 6s, so I got 1 Dark Knight that I get to defeat. Here comes another die roll, a 7. 2 Dark Knights went down. Ping! Trivia time. During the Second Crusade, about 50 years after our fight here, the valley becomes the site of a major defeat which effectively ended the later German contingency of the crusade from ever returning. The second major crusade will be announced by Pope Eugene III, where he entices 2 friggin' kings, Louis VII of France and Conrad III of Germany, to march all the way across of Europe to come to the Holy Land. Of course, the 2 kings will quarrel along the way. After crossing into Byzantine territory into Anatolia, both armies separated and were thus defeated by the Seljuk Turks. Now ask yourself, will I do any better than my descendants? Will I live to even sire any of my descendants? Go back to this ref page. We move that to a 6. I push on, because that's the here I am. Do I take another Kingly Deliberations? Those are sort of interesting, but they're really based for a different sort of knight that I'm playing. Because my die 6, I rolled a 1. Defeat D6 fell ones, change class to air, or lose my plot armor. Now, I did not want to be in air for the rest of this battle. I will continue to be... do I want to use a mulligan here? It's a bad roll. But I like the fact that if I ever get into trouble, I'm going to win that. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll drop that to a 7, and we'll re-roll that die. Single die, a 4. Defeat a Dark Knight. Well, that's a lot better. I come back over to here, defeating a Dark Knight, tests of prowess, 2 dice, and I got myself a 6. 6 as I defeated the Dark Knight early. Now the battle will continue from here. All I can say is my dice results get worse and someone will pay in blood. More later.